Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into something that's been making headlines and, keeping a lot of people up at night. Are we on the verge of a recession?
Mm,
But before we get started, real quick note. We pulled together information from all sorts of sources, to keep you in the loop on the latest developments. And sometimes we even use AI to help us out. Think of it as your one-stop shop for all things fascinating and informative. But remember, everything here is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Accuracy isn't guaranteed, so use this info responsibly and ethically. Now, with that out of the way, let's get down to business. I think we've all seen the market getting a bit jittery lately, and there's a definite sense of uncertainty in the air. So, to help you make sense of it all, we've dug into expert opinions, we've pored over economic indicators, and we've even taken a peek into the world of prediction markets.
right, those platforms where people actually place bets on what the future holds. And what's interesting is that these prediction markets are sending some pretty strong signals. For example, the odds of a recession hitting in 2025 have jumped to 40% on one popular platform. That's a pretty dramatic increase in just a month, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. A 40% chance of a recession, that's enough to make anyone a little nervous. But before we hit the panic button, let's get some perspective from the experts. What are economists saying about all of this?
Well, they're definitely seeing some warning signs. Global trade tensions, unpredictable policies, and even a dip in consumer confidence are all causing concern. But it's important to remember that they're not all predicting doom and gloom. It's not a foregone conclusion that a recession is inevitable.
Okay, so there's a bit of a mixed bag out there. Some reasons to worry, but also some reasons to be hopeful. What are some of the more positive indicators that experts are pointing to?
There are a couple of bright spots that complicate the picture. For one job, openings are holding steady, which is always a good sign. And consumer spending, which is a major driver of our economy, hasn't fallen off a cliff. So it's not a simple open and shut case of recession ahead.
All right, so it's not a black and white situation. Which raises the question, how do we even define a recession officially? Who makes the call?
That's a great question. Officially, a recession is defined as a widespread and significant decline in economic activity lasting for several months. It's not just a minor dip. It has to be a pretty substantial downturn affecting multiple sectors. And here in the U.S., the official referee who makes the call on whether we're in a recession or not is the National Bureau of Economic Research, or NBER. They look at a wide range of data before making a determination.
So it's not just a gut feeling or a hunch, there's an actual process. But I'm guessing the NBER doesn't just wake up one morning and shout recession from the rooftops. They must have some sort of system for figuring this out, right?
You're absolutely right. Economists use a variety of signals and indicators to try and predict recessions, especially since the official declaration often comes months after a downturn has already begun. Think of them as economic detectives piecing together clues to solve the mystery of the economy's next move.
I love that economic detectives. So what are some of these clues they're looking for, and how can we, the non-economists, understand what they mean? Maybe we could think of each indicator as a piece of the puzzle, and you can walk us through how it all fits together.
I like that idea. Let's start with something everyone can relate to: consumer behavior. After all, how people spend their money has a huge impact on the economy. In fact, it makes up about 70% of the entire U.S. economy.
Wow, 70%. That's incredible. I knew consumer spending was important, but I didn't realize it was that big of a piece of the pie.
It is. One expert even compared tracking retail sales to navigating a foggy ocean. He said it's like trying to spot the first signs of land as you sail through the mist. You get glimpses of what might be ahead, but it's easy to get disoriented. So what do you think economists are looking at when it comes to consumer spending? What kinds of clues might indicate rough waters ahead?
Well, it seems logical that if people are worried about a recession, they'd start tightening their belts and spending less. So I'm guessing economists are looking at things like retail sales figures, both in-store and online. If those numbers start to drop significantly, that could be a sign that consumers are losing confidence and bracing for tough times.
You're exactly right. Retail sales are a crucial indicator of consumer behavior, and a decline can definitely signal trouble on the horizon. But here's where things get interesting. It's not just about how much people are spending right now, it's also about how they feel about the economy, because those feelings can have a big impact on their spending habits down the road.
That makes sense. Even if I'm doing okay financially at the moment, if I'm constantly hearing about a potential recession, I might start to get nervous and hold back on making big purchases, like a new car or a home renovation.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of consumer confidence comes in. When people are uncertain about the future, they tend to hesitate. They might postpone big-ticket purchases, delay investments, or even cut back on everyday spending. This cautious behavior can have a ripple effect throughout the economy.
It's like a domino effect, right? One person's uncertainty can lead to another person's caution and so on,
Yeah.
potentially slowing down the entire economy.
Precisely. And unfortunately, recent surveys show that consumer confidence has taken a pretty big hit. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index,
Hmm.
a key measure of how people feel about the economy, has dropped by 10.5%. That's a significant decline. And it's definitely something that economists are paying close attention to.
Wow, 10.5%. That's a steep drop. But what's causing this wave of economic anxiety? Is it just the fear of a recession, or are there other factors at play?
It's likely a combination of things. Persistent inflation, eroding purchasing power, global uncertainty, and even domestic political events can all contribute to a sense of unease. People might feel like things are out of their control, and that can make them less confident about the future.
So, if consumer confidence is such a vital ingredient for a healthy economy, what can we do to boost it? Is it just a matter of hoping for the best, or are there concrete steps we can take to turn things around?
That's the million-dollar question. While we can't control everything that happens in the global economy, there are things we can do on an individual level to mitigate our anxieties and make informed financial decisions. For example, instead of getting caught up in the hype and fear-mongering, we can focus on understanding the facts and making a plan based on our own individual circumstances.
That's great advice. Knowledge is power, as they say. But let's not forget about those other economic detectives and their clues. What are some of the other indicators that economists are using to gauge the health of the economy?
Another fascinating clue economists look at is the cost of borrowing money. It might seem a bit technical, but it can reveal a lot about the underlying sentiment in the economy. You see, typically it costs more to borrow money for a longer period of time. But when the economy starts showing signs of trouble, this relationship can actually flip.
Wait, you mean it can become cheaper to borrow money for the long term than for the short term? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what can happen when investors get nervous about the future. They start pouring money into long-term bonds, driving down their yields, which essentially means the cost of borrowing for the long term decreases. This phenomenon is often referred to as a yield curve inversion. And while it's not a foolproof predictor, it has historically been a fairly reliable signal of an impending recession.
So that's one to watch out for. Is this something that's happening right now?
While some parts of the yield curve have indeed inverted recently, the picture isn't entirely clear-cut. It's one piece of the puzzle. But we need to consider other indicators as well. Speaking of other indicators, another tool that economists use to assess recession risk is something called the SAM rule,
The SAM rule, what's that all about?
named after economist Claudia Sam. The SAM rule focuses on changes in the unemployment rate. It basically states that if the 3-month moving average of the unemployment rate rises by 0.5 percentage points or more relative to its lows over the previous 12 months, then the economy has a high probability of being in a recession.
So it's looking for a significant and sustained increase in unemployment as a signal of economic distress. Makes sense? Are we seeing that kind of jump in unemployment right now?
Actually, quite the opposite. The job market is currently very strong, with unemployment rates near historic lows. So according to the SAM rule, the risk of a recession appears to be low at the moment.
Okay, so we've got some mixed signals here. Some indicators like consumer confidence and certain parts of the yield curve are flashing yellow, while others like the strong job market and the SAM rule are giving us more reassuring signals. It's a bit like trying to navigate through a maze with conflicting directions.
That's a great analogy. And that's precisely the challenge with predicting recessions. There's no single magic bullet, no crystal ball that tells us for sure what's going to happen.
So how do we make sense of all this conflicting information? It's enough to make your head spin. Is there anything we can learn from past recessions that might help us navigate the current uncertainty?
Absolutely. While every recession is unique, there are often recurring patterns and underlying causes that we can examine. For example, the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s was driven by overspeculation and excessive risk-taking in the tech sector, while the 2008 financial crisis was rooted in subprime mortgages and a highly leveraged financial system. Understanding these historical precedents can give us valuable insights into the potential risks and vulnerabilities of our current economic landscape.
That's a great point. Looking back can sometimes help us see forward more clearly. But even with all of this knowledge and all of these indicators, it seems like predicting recessions is still more of an art than a science.
You're right, it's definitely not a perfect science. It's more like trying to predict the weather. You can analyze all the data and look for patterns, but sometimes Mother Nature just throws you a curveball.
Exactly. There are always unpredictable factors, unexpected events that can shift the economic landscape in an instant. So it's so important to stay informed and be adaptable and have a plan that can weather a variety of storms.
Absolutely.
So, what's the main takeaway for our listeners today? How should they be thinking about all of this information and the possibility of a recession?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that while there are certainly some storm clouds gathering on the horizon, it's not necessarily time to batten down the hatches and head for the economic bunker. We're in a period of uncertainty.
Hmm.
But that doesn't automatically mean a recession is inevitable.
That's reassuring to hear. So, what can we as individuals do to navigate this uncertainty and feel more empowered, even if things do take a downturn?
I think it starts with focusing on the things we can control. We can make sure our personal finances are in order, have a plan for managing our expenses, and even explore opportunities to diversify our income.
That's great advice. And maybe it's also about shifting our perspective a bit. Instead of getting bogged down by all the negative headlines, maybe we can focus on the positive things that are happening both in our own lives and in the world around us.
I completely agree. There's always something to be grateful for. And cultivating an attitude of resilience and optimism can make a big difference in how we weather any storm, economic or otherwise.
So, to wrap things up, we've explored some of the key indicators that economists use to try and predict recessions. And we've learned that it's a complex and nuanced process, kind of like piecing together a giant economic puzzle. But the good news is that even amidst the uncertainty, there are things we can do to feel more prepared and in control.
Absolutely. By staying informed, making thoughtful decisions, and focusing on the things we can influence, we can navigate these economic waters with confidence and emerge even stronger on the other side.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. And remember, knowledge is your best defense against uncertainty. So keep learning, stay curious. And we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.